Uh, so, um, yeah, as Harsh was saying, this topic is, yeah, there's some links to the talk we just saw by Julia. If I'm talking to you in the future, you're watching the recording, I highly recommend you go grab that. It's also going to be complementary to the talk that comes right after this from Marta and Fatima about actually implementing and the story of a real product and the impact it created. So my name is Guy. I'm based in Thoughtworks Barcelona. I've been in Thoughtworks for almost 6 years now. And I'd like to talk to you today about responsible AI in practice. So really building on the previous talk where Julie was talking about some of the aspects of managing the risk as product people with AI. Uh, Today, I'd like to take you through a more tangible example and get a feel for what it looks like and what it feels like in our everyday work. So we know, well, as we were just saying, and as we saw in the talk before, there are all sorts of challenges with AI, right? And getting it right or avoiding negative impact seems to get getting harder and harder lately. There's no lack of examples. So recently, we've seen fake images making their way into our mainstream news. There's the infamous case of this Amazon recruiting bot that was ultimately discriminating against women. And there are impacts beyond the products and services themselves on our jobs, on the economy, on all sectors of society. And the responses to this are also coming along. So just a couple of weeks ago, President Biden signed an executive order in the States to try and regulate or limit the negative impacts of AI. And the EU is, of course, working on its Digital AI Act. This is also being supported and collaborated on by different businesses as well. But in addition to government and business, our users, the different consumers, are also very much aware and they're expecting us to adopt ethical and responsible thinking when we're working with AI. This is a sample from our recent consumer survey. You can get the full details from this QR code. The interesting thing is this is a huge number, right? So it's clear that both governments and business and our users are expecting us to take responsibility for this. And then, of course, the interesting question, the challenge is what can we actually do with possible harms and risks of this scale? I think what drove me into this specific topic is that it was very hard. I think in many talks and some articles I saw, they give you advice like, think of the unintended consequences, think of what can go wrong. And I find that quite useless, honestly. I mean, how can I think of things that I've never thought of? And I think I wanted something that would help really guide me in these areas. One example of these kinds of tools is the Responsible Tech Playbook. Again, you can find that here. And basically, a lot of smart people have come up with tools, methods, frameworks to help navigate the potential impact of our digital products. It's not just think of everything. They'll go through specific areas. One tool that we highlight in the playbook is called the Ethical Explorer from the Omidyar network. And there are different risk areas represented by these cards. There's disinformation, exclusion or discrimination, algorithmic bias, and they highlight and propose different questions that we can ask when we're looking at our products. What is likely to go wrong? What should we take into account while we're building to avoid these different risks? So this is a really good example of going beyond, just think of unintended consequences. Of course, when we're working with AI, there's extra challenges. Just to mention a few that will make our lives maybe a bit more challenging. As we know, quality AI depends on having a lot of data, but not only the quantity, the quality of the data, the format, availability, and freshness. Working with the models themselves, depending on the skills of our team, can be more or less opaque, and that's also something which can be challenging to transmit to users. Another challenge, especially with generative AI, is non-deterministic output. Basically, you don't know what you're going to get every time. And then how you test a product, how you control for its possibly negative outputs becomes extra challenging. And ultimately, all of this together, it's become a lot of these tools are so common, so accessible, so easy to use that we're putting very powerful tools in the hands of many, many people. And with these opportunities, a lot of the possible harms can spread very quickly. So if we look at the frameworks we were looking at before, I was looking for things that could be an extension of that to help me navigate the AI-specific risks when I'm working with these products. One example that we're going to have a look at today is the AI blind spot. This was developed by a team at MIT. And as you can see, the idea is somewhat similar. We look at different risk areas at different points in the product lifecycle. And each risk area will raise a series of questions, possible considerations, possible mitigations for the risks. So I'd like to, as I said at the beginning, I'd like to try and get a feel for what it's really tangibly like to work with this kind of framework and what kind of things could we come up against in our actual products. Now, in the past few months, we've been working with different clients around the world running different types of experiments, developing different products. We also have a series of internal projects. So I've simplified this case study into something that is, let's say, a combination that'll help us highlight some of the tools and some of the learnings that we've seen when dealing with AI in a responsible way. So we're going to go into this synthetic case study. And like many product ideas, this one comes from frustration. Frustration mostly around our travel experience. So many of us are used to traveling or were used to traveling, let's say, a lot for work. And there's many friction points in there, right? So every time you book, there's a million pop-ups. Do you want to choose a seat? Do you want to add a suitcase? Do you want to add insurance? Do you want this? Do you want that? It's really annoying. Getting to the airport, even worse sometimes, right? There's maybe long queues and the boarding's a mess and it takes a while. And even after the flight, when you land, it could be just the start of the struggle. How do you get to the center of the city or the place where you need to go? What should you do? What should you avoid? And honestly, as a product person, I think with all the technology and with all the knowledge that we have around today, it should be much better, this whole experience. Fortunately, with AI, we can address a lot of these things. So we've put together some ideas on what an extraordinary travel experience would look like with the help of AI. And this includes basically addressing those pain points. So when I'm booking, I want some AI to understand my profile, offer me a simple package, which is what I need without a million pop-ups and extras. When I'm checking in, right, we already have facial recognition technology. You know it's me. I don't need to go through all these checkpoints and queue up. Right? We can have smart seat allocation and just let people on in a more efficient way. In the flight as well. Again, like lots of entertainment companies, they know what I like. And in terms of, like having some nice food and drinks on the flight, we can copy the model of these grocery stores where you have no checkout. That's perfectly feasible today. And of course, getting to the destination, something I'd like to have is not just a generic list of recommendations for tourists or business travelers. I want something personalized for me. So we can have some language model possibly putting together those recommendations and giving it to me in a format that's really easy for me, right? Lovely travel experience overall. But, right, so some of you have probably already noticed I've touched on things which can be quite challenging in terms of responsible tech. So let's see how we can identify the possible risks and mitigate them to some degree. So what I'd like to do is have a look at the selection of some areas of the AI blind spot framework. We're going to look at 4 different cards. And for each card, we're going to focus on one bit of the customer journey here and try to identify the possible risks and mitigations. And that should give us a feel for what it's really like. Now, I'm going to start with maybe the juiciest one, which is around representative data. So we know, AI, there have been some notorious cases where we've had discrimination and bias reflected or even amplified in certain models. So this card invites us, first of all, to ask is our data truly representative, not only of the users, but of everyone that could be impacted? And is there a risk of excluding or harming certain vulnerable groups in some way? So for this, I'd like to focus on the first two steps of our customer journey, booking and check-in. Try to think what could go wrong here. So for the booking phase, I wanted some personalized recommendation based on my profile. But I'm a pretty privileged, comfortable traveler. Could all different types of travelers really enjoy this, or maybe not be harmed at least by this type of recommendation? Is it the same for people in different socioeconomic classes? Right? Could I be making a system that benefits people that can pay for more at the expense of the experience and quality of travel of those who can't? And when we go to check-in, right, I had my lovely idea about just facial recognition and waltz right in and sit down. But this is really notorious for being, well, not working well and discriminating against women, against minorities and various underrepresented groups. So this is definitely a hotspot for my product. What are the types of things that I can do to mitigate these risks? So something we mentioned in other places and also in the previous talk is to audit your data set. From the technical perspective, there are different metrics we can look at. We can look at distribution and segment it by the different groups. And that'll give us a feel for, is there proper representation? But also once the model's trained and we're producing output, we can see, is it performing equally or fairly across those different groups? Another dimension, which is non-technical, is to have different voices represented when you're building the data set. That's something we'll come back to a bit later as well. One thing that's also come up in the common discourse is working with synthetic data. So maybe you're adding data to augment the data of underrepresented groups. We've had mixed success with that. I should add a word of caution. In some cases, it hasn't had much of an effect. In some cases, it's even made things worse. So I think we should keep an eye on that and use caution with it. But in some cases, it might help us out. So that's, I think, one of the big challenges we start with. So next, in our building phase, we're going to look at the card of abusability, right? Is our system vulnerable in some way? And how might bad actors try to use it for some malicious purpose? So for this, again, there's a lot of things that we'd want to look at. I'm going to focus just on the last bit of our customer journey, the personalized recommendations generated for your destination. What could go wrong here? So especially with Gen AI and the type of solution we're looking at here, it requires integrating a lot of data across many systems. And that, of course, creates lots of vulnerable points. And Gen AI, with its knack for hallucinations, of course, it could just produce fake information that could harm our users. And depending on where the data comes from, we might even be sending users to types of services or places that aren't completely honest and they're trying to actively harm them. And so this could be a serious problem. And here, what are the things we do? One common practice, this is something we do with any kind of digital product, not just AI, is threat modeling, mapping out the components, identifying vulnerabilities, and addressing them while they're being built. One step further is red teaming, where we put on our pirate hats and actually try to break the system. And this is sometimes a way to try and find different vectors for attack that don't come up in other analysis. And again, here, there's also a non-technical dimension of understanding the point of view of different experts here, not just technical, but maybe sociological, economical. In some cases, we have criminal law advisors to try and help us understand the different incentives and mechanisms that could be at play here. And that will inform a safer system. So this is in the building phase. In our deployment phase, another really big one and very common problematic area for product people in general, and even more so with AI, optimization criteria. What metrics are we optimizing for? And this card specifically and explicitly asks us, what trade-offs do these metrics represent? And are there possible negative impacts on vulnerable populations because we're optimizing for a certain metric. Now, in our use case, we're going to look at booking and the in-flight part of our customer journey. Right. So for booking in many digital products, I mean, this is a business. You want to optimize for conversion. You want to optimize for revenue, some level of retention. Right? These are all sensible, logical business metrics. Right? But we can imagine things that could also result in harm because of that. And so if we're optimizing for conversion, are we driving passengers to book things they don't need or things that are beyond what they need? If we're optimizing for revenue and just driving people to consume more, right, will they consume more, making not only them unhappy, but also leading to more waste, more environmental impact? In the airline world, of course, this is a very sensitive topic. And as product people, I think many of us are aware of this challenge, and we're fortunately aware of some things that can be paths to solutions. So of course, we never look at just one metric or one small set of metrics. We want to actively look for balancing metrics, looking at a whole suite of metrics. So knowing, for example, that even if we're optimizing for conversion and revenue, we can identify, is our customer satisfaction still high? Is our engagement and retention still good? Are other metrics, such as environmental impact, also staying healthy at this time? Now, being pragmatic, this is really a business decision. Some companies will go more in the direction of, let's make money, but we do need to balance that and at least have that conversation and make a decision in an informed way. Another thing, when we're looking at metrics, we don't just want to look at the, let's say, the overall sum or the average. Like we were saying before, as a measure to avoid discrimination or identify harms to a specific group, we want to monitor the distribution. How is the metric when we slice it up for the different segments of the population? And that's something that can very early on highlight something that could be problematic. Right, so this is a bit of our discussion on any digital product around the optimization criteria. And the last card we'll look at today is consultation. Now, consultation applies to all phases of the product lifecycle. So we want to understand who's affected, and we want to take that into account before, during, and after the development. And this card goes even one step further and asks us to think, beyond the users, beyond the other people that could be affected. What kind of world, what kind of society are we promoting with this product? So, of course, in this example, if we're looking at airline travel, we have our direct users, but how could this impact airline employees? How could it impact airport staff? How could it impact our non-users or people that are not using the service? Will they be unfairly disadvantaged? And we can go even further. How would this affect, if we're creating more travel and more recommendations to specific destinations? How does that affect those residents, those economies, etc.? So, of course, a lot of things that we want to keep in mind here. It's a very, very broad remit. Okay, so going about including these different communities and combining their feedback together with the metrics that we just mentioned before is the general recommendation when we're talking about this card. I do want to add a point on being pragmatic and realistic. We're not going to have 100 product workshops with thousands of people in all the different airports and destinations and things like that. Ultimately, you do want to balance it. So one thing Julia said in the talk just before us, you can do assumption mapping, or in your interviews with different experts in the areas you're dealing with, you can give open questions on who else might be affected and what you think the impact might be. And so we need to kind of be pragmatic and balance that with the time and space we have. But asking ourselves those questions and giving some space to explore things beyond our users is really one of the best ways to identify things that you may have not thought of on your own or that are not contained solely in your team. So looking at those 4 cards, first of all, my feeling is we have touched on a lot of very interesting questions, and the challenges and solutions for them are really non-trivial. But at the same time, I think it's very useful to have this structure to help guide us. All right, it's not just think of unintended consequences, think of everything that can go wrong. It's these smart people that have thought of things that are likely or could commonly go wrong in digital products, specifically working with AI. And they propose these questions and some ways to explore them. So now I can be more confident that what I'm building is not going to be harmful. It's not going to end humanity, most likely. And ultimately, it's, if we've been looking at the different points in these different cards, it's not that different from our good product practices that we have in our teams anyway. Right? So as product people, we know we want to understand our users in depth and the context they live and work in. We want to have clear goals. We want to have clear metrics and understand their impact from different perspectives. We want to have experts in different domains, not just our technical team, but of course, people that know the business and know the impact outside of it. And we adopt a mindset of design thinking and experimentation. So we try out something, we validate it, we measure the impact before scaling or iterating even more. So with these good product practices, with the addition of these smart questions and frameworks, I think we're in a great position, not just to reduce harm and not end humanity, but extend our product process to make products that we're truly proud of. And actually, we'll have a very nice example in our very next talk with Marta and Fatima. They'll talk about a product that not only avoided harm in terms of discrimination or bad output, but it actually improved diversity and inclusion. So I'm looking forward to see that as well. And that'll be it from me for now. But of course, we have a few minutes left for any questions you might have. Thank you very much.